Morning, everybody. How you doing today? In this episode of the show, we're going to talk about the role of security and privacy in technology. Now, bear with me as I kind of go into a bit of a rant here. You may have noticed the last episode of Mornings with Mark got flagged under the ContentID automated system on YouTube. Apple made a copyright claim against most videos that I could tell that were using snippets from the keynote, but not the full compilations from major media outlets like Engadget or Verge. Now, I believe that my video was within fair use in the US or fair dealing here in Canada, because essentially the format was this. I was talking to the camera, I would cut to a quick snippet of a key privacy or security point in the keynote for a few seconds, then come back and then discuss that point, put it in the larger context, refer to other research that supported that point, and I think that falls under the educational, editorial, as well as the research exemptions around fair dealing and fair use. But again, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't dispute it on legal grounds. It's just based on my interpretation and the way that ContentID system really works on YouTube. There's really no point in disputing it, because if Apple fires their lawyers up, I don't have the resources to fight it, so it was easier. It's not a copyright strike, it was just a claim. So I just simply re-uploaded the video with those parts removed, with placeholders referring people to the original video on Apple's website. So minor thing there, but it really kind of reminded me and triggered a few points coming together to talk about the larger role of security and privacy within technology. So while that was a copyright claim around commercial works, ContentID as a system is very much designed to do that, and it does that really well, perhaps too well, in that it steamrolls over a lot of fair use and fair dealing, and obviously it's not in YouTube's interest to support that. They want to have their advertisers and commercial interests guarded first. So very clear profit motivation there, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But at the same time, two articles popped up, or two issues with a lot of articles popped up this week around content on YouTube that don't have a clear profit motivation, so the platform is waffling on dealing with them. The first was this horrendous incident of continued harassment and hate speech against a particular activist and journalist. I believe they're a journalist anyway. I'll link to the article. You can read it themselves. I don't want to call out those people here. That's not the point. But it was a pretty clear example to anyone who viewed the content or the transcript of the content that was hate speech, pure and simple, just horrendous to see. But YouTube, in a 4-tweet explanation, don't ask me why it was 4 tweets, explained publicly that they reviewed it and it was a case of free speech and it didn't go against their community guidelines, which most people are up in arms about, saying it's somewhat ridiculous given that harassment is not allowed on the platform. Hate speech and incitement isn't supposed to be allowed, yet you've reviewed this, which seems like a slam dunk to nail it, and you've allowed it to go on. At the same time, there was also highlighting an issue around YouTube's algorithm and the promotion of videos in the rabbit hole effect, which YouTube continues to deny. But I think any of us who use the platform know that if you click on a video, all of a sudden you're bombarded by other videos of similar stripes, and you quickly sort of get away from the original video by being led sort of like the game of telephone a little bit. Every hop gets the original message a little bit dirtier, a little noisier, so that it's less and less clear. But in this case, it was innocent home videos or activity videos that families were sharing with themselves or marking as public, unfortunately. And again, there's a whole different issue around uploading videos of your kids to YouTube or pictures of your kids to social media. But anyway, these families had decided to do that, and the algorithm has started to recommend them to potential predators, to people who are sexualizing children inappropriately, which is always. And just really some abhorrent and horrific stuff. And follow these links at your own risk. They are within the context of journalism, so it's not that bad, but it is pretty tough stuff to read, to know that these things go on the platform. And again, YouTube saying, well, no, the rabbit hole effect isn't there, and they've taken one step to help prevent this, and they won't let kids live stream, which is just a tiny step forward. They need to do a lot more to protect kids and to inform parents and families about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate on the platform. But all this ties back to motivation. And you're probably thinking, what does this all tie back to cybersecurity, to privacy? Well, it's pretty clear that people act in rather predictable ways to defend their interests, and they're incentivized to defend those interests. So Fernando Montenegro from 451 Research, fantastically smart individual, has long been a proponent of using economic modeling to cybersecurity issues, and essentially looking at motivations versus outcomes. And I think this is an interesting one here, is that YouTube has a very clear profit motivation, and their actions line up with that, and everything else is so far away from that clear profit motivation that it's hard for them to make a decision. And it's not just YouTube. And what I mean here is that keeping users on the platform and happy has an indirect line to their revenue stream, whereas keeping the people who are paying for ads is a far more direct line than the 2 or 3 hop from keeping users on the platform. Now they're obviously combined, but it helps to prioritize. And the same thing happens for Facebook, who's had scandal after scandal after scandal, and Twitter, who recently continues to struggle to implement the very basics of their policy, to do it consistently, and again, to motivation. Their motivation is advertisers and keeping people on the platform. And if people aren't leaving in droves, they're not going to take action. And unfortunately, based on the content, so they obviously took down a huge amount of ISIS-related terrorist content years ago, but they continue to allow white nationalist and far-right extremist content, which arguably, based on the statistics, is responsible for far more terrorist acts within the continental U.S. Than ISIS. But there's this real challenge here as far as motivation, is the platforms are struggling to do what's right, and it really comes down to a technical aspect of objective versus subjective. So ContentID is objective. It's taking the audio from something like the Apple Keynote and matching it up to the audio in various videos, and it can objectively say, this is that. The other types of content are subjective. And that takes human, and that takes judgment calls, that takes clear policy, and that takes practice. So what does this have to do with privacy? What does this have to do with security? Well, I'm glad you stayed with us this long, because I promise this all wraps up. At least I hope it all wraps up. I believe that security and privacy are fundamentally misunderstood because of the way that they've been practiced for a really long time. So for the longest time, security has always been bolt-on. Privacy has always been sort of hard shell around the edge of, we won't let information leak out to the public, but internally it's fair game. We covered that a while back on information management and with Facebook's new direction. The problem is that people now have this perception that security is bulky, security is problematic. Privacy, I can't build privacy into my products because I won't have the ability to apply machine learning and big data analytics and take advantage of all this valuable data. I can't resell it, I can't do this, that, and the other thing. And I don't think those things hold up to the light of day. They don't pass the sniff test. They're easy answers to push back on. And people go, well, no, I can't. Security is really challenging, and you need, the wizard on the hill to understand security. It's bull. Okay, security is really straightforward. It's trying to make sure that whatever system you build does what you intend and only what you intend. And privacy is all about information management, not exposing information needlessly, and controlling access and monitoring that access to ensure that A, you know what you've got, but also that you don't infringe on people's privacy. Being clear and transparent in the information you're taking, and holding up to that standard. And I think all of these things, privacy by design, security by design, and in practice, is done better by breaking down these barriers, by making sure that security teams and privacy-focused developers are working together to build a solution from the outset. But the problem is all of our organizations are not set up like that. Most of our organizations are set up to bolt this stuff on at the end, to do compliance audits, to do reviews before they go live, as opposed to in the building stage. And where this ties back to is motivation, because we're not seeing security or privacy designs as, and there's no incentive, right? The incentive is, I don't want to get slapped on the wrist, or I don't want to end up in the front page or all over the internet going viral because of a privacy breach or because of a security breach, when I don't think that's a proper motivator. We need to figure out some way to tie this is the right thing to do and this is the best way to build into an economic motivator. Now, the sad thing is I don't have an answer for that. I don't know what that motivator is, but I know we need to find something, because like we've seen with YouTube, where they have a very clear profit motivation to keep copyrighted material off, and they do a great job on it, all of the social networks are struggling with hate speech with discrimination, with harassment, because at the end of the day, there's no direct economic motivator to get them to deal with it. It's a reputational issue. It's a please don't leave our platform issue. And we as users aren't doing our job by leaving. We're sticking around and we're saying, well, no, they're still good on these platforms. We're going to deal with them. So there's no motivator there. And it's the same thing when you're building technology with security and privacy. People aren't building it in because of this misperception about the fact that it's super hard and it's super difficult and it will stifle innovation and it will slow you down. Not true. Where that comes from is the way that we've implemented with separate teams, with bolting it on at the end, and instead of building it in to start. If you build it in the start, these things are just another aspect of your design. Security is not going to slow you down. Privacy is not going to slow you down. But what's the motivator? That's my question to you. That's my challenge to you, is what is the motivator that will get people to start to think that way? Yes, giving talks, doing vlogs, all this kind of stuff, fine, whatever. But at the end of the day, there needs to be some sort of economic incentive or motivator that's not just compliance or regulation. We haven't seen the full impact of GDPR, but I don't think that's the end all be all. I think it's a lot more complex than that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hit me up online at MarkNCA in the comments down below, and as always, by email, me at markn.ca. What do you think that motivator is? Do you agree with my perception and my position on the role of security and privacy in designs, that things should be secure by default, things should have privacy built in by default? How do we get there? Big questions. Hope you're set up for a fantastic day. I look forward to talking to you, and we'll see you on the next episode of the show.